This is a true story. Once there was a city, the ruin of an ancient city. Dark, always dark, as if the skies had been scorched and the sun removed from them. The city was wet. Mist and rain fell on the asphalt and cement of the broken city. Windows lay derelict, broken open in warehouse buildings. The rooftops were flat and wide and long. Little moved in the city. There were graveyards, and in them sometimes shadows crept. One boy crept and hid and ran through the dark city. Little boy, fur like a wolf-long nose. On his back, there twitched the stumps of what once were wings, but now were constantly bloody and scabbed. Alert, he ran over the rooftops of the dark city, his feet sliding on the slick asphalt and cement. He leapt from building to building, and occasionally, when the clouds above cleared enough that he could see the moon, he howled. He ran in the city from that which chased him. There was the clouds of ancient mists that roiled through the alleys and the streets. They would cover whole city blocks, buildings, everything. And when they moved on, things would change. They were different. The mists had a memory of what once was. The mists remembered what no one else did. The boy ran from them. He knew that if the mists caught him, they would devour him. One day, however, the mists seemed to move with a mind of their own. He ran from them, but they followed him. They chased him block after block, turn after turn, always on his heels. And he ran, and he ran, and he jumped, and he tried. But he couldn't make it to the rooftop. His claws scratched down the side of the building. He scrabbled, but the mists were coming upon him. They were there, they were upon him. He turned, he looked, and they devoured him. They ate him up. He was sucked in to the world of the silver mists. He looked around, terrified, and the mists roiled around him. Hello, 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 hello. They called to him, hello and welcome, welcome, welcome. And he saw in the mists figures moving, dark shadows, inviting him to come and join them. He walked blindly through. His hands reached out. He tried to find his way through the mists. He tried to find their edge, their exit. But the shadows only moved around him, surrounded him in their dance, made him one of them. And he was turned and whirled and moved by the shadows until he could barely remember that he wasn't a shadow himself. Then he saw her, a woman in the silver of the mists, dressed in celestial garb, her face shining like moonlight. He called out, and she came towards him, her hands outstretched, her eyes wide and sad and loving. He called. And from her, parting her face, dispelling her as if she were a cloud, figure came running, dark, its face shrouded, intent, a predator's gait, loping towards the boy. Hunger in its eyes. The boy, the little wolf boy, eyes wide, turned, sprinted himself through the mist, looking over his shoulder. He could see it, its face just barely behind him, catching up on his heels. Its eyes feral like cat's eyes, slits. Its face narrow, its skin green, its teeth sharp, loping after him, its clawed hands touching on the ground as it chased right at his heels, right at his heels. He could see in its eyes how it wanted to tear him apart, how it wanted to sink its teeth into his skin, pull. He burst from the mist, rolling and tumbling out onto the street, scrabbling up and looking back behind him. And there he could see just barely, as we do, the shadows moving on the edge of the cloud. And he saw it there, the creature, pacing at the edge of the mist, watching him. The boy got up to his feet, dusted himself off, and ran. He ran and he ran. He could hear the whisper of the mists behind him. The ocean broke this place, it said. Long ago, the floods came, it whispered to him. Long ago, we were swallowed up, the mists said. And it is coming again. And it is coming again. And it is coming again. And then they were gone, rounding another city corner, disappearing into their journey through the city streets. And the boy quivered for a moment, and then he turned and he began to run and run and run. And he ran until he ran right out from the dark city, out from the buildings and the darkness and the mist, out from the howling home that he had known for so long. The wolf boy ran. He ran until dawn came. A dawn which he did not recognize, he had not seen before. At least not in his waking memory, perhaps long, long ago in the childhood that he could not quite place. But dawn came and he found himself staggering after many, many miles of running, staggering along a broken, cracked road. The sun rose and it was hot, hot and fierce and hard upon his skin. He was sweating. The ground here was a wasteland. The sun baked it so that cracks ran through the parched earth. And he walked along an endless highway in this wasteland, in this parched land. He walked, he walked, he walked. He trudged. For what seemed like years, he trudged. If he were not a wolf boy, he would have died along that road. But he didn't. He lived. He found a way to survive, and he continued his journey, ever mindful of what the mists had whispered to him. It is coming again. The waves are coming again. The flood is on its way. He remembered, and he marched ceaselessly away from the place where he had almost been devoured. He grew, time passed, and he survived by his wits, by his ferocity, by the way he knew these desert lands. And one day, he began to see some trees, some desert bushes, some plant life that was as hardy as he, growing up here in the wasteland. A new climate developing, a new ecosystem that he was entering into. And in this new land, he walked for some time and he began to see signs of life. Not just the little insects and grubs that he had lived off of in the parched lands, but birds, and in the distance, rabbits, hare, moving along, and other scorpions, other creatures inhabiting these places, these borderlands. And one day, he came across something he hadn't seen before. he was walking along the road and he heard a voice. Is someone there? Help me! Help me! He heard. And he came up over a rise and he peeked out and he looked for the voice. And there he saw her in the distance, where a tree grew up, a big tree, bigger than any he had seen, perhaps. And there, at its base, there was a little human girl. And strange thing, the roots of the tree held her fast. They surrounded her and bound her. So he came to her. Help me, she said. I fell asleep here, and I must have slept for many years, because when I awoke, the sapling had grown around me and pulled me to it, and I can't get loose. He saw that her legs were all trapped by the roots that held her. He understood her. He spoke her language. Perhaps he remembered it from many, many years before. Perhaps he remembered it from those early years that he had forgotten. But he remembered the words. And he felt for her. He wanted to pull her loose, help her be free, perhaps find a friend. But I think we all know that's not what happened. He had lived in the desert for many years. And there, where she was pinned by that tree, helpless, unable to move, unable to defend herself, he ate her alive. He ate her while she screamed. And he continued on his journey, stomach fuller, but soul heavier. That wolf boy. It is easy to hate him, but would you have done any differently? The borderlands became a forest, something he had never seen before. And there, in the patchy edges of this forest land, a voice called out to him. Well, hello there, it said. Hello! I think you're looking for something, said the voice. I think I know where you can find it. And he saw it there, up on a tree branch. It was a black raven, perched there in the tree looking down at him. I recognize you. I know what you are, it said. How can you know me? The boy said. I've never seen you before. Yes, well, I recognize you nonetheless, it said. I can show you the way. I can show you the way. The raven leapt off the branch and began to fly. I don't trust you, said the boy. I don't trust you. The raven said, and continued to fly. And the boy glanced around, didn't know what to do. The raven was disappearing through the trees, so the boy began to follow, loping after it. And the two traveled together for some time, the boy barely keeping pace, traveling deeper and deeper into these woods, not knowing where he was going. The raven led. I'll show you the way, it called back occasionally. Until finally, deep in the forest, it had turned into green and wet. The earth of the forest began to give under his feet, like soft loam. He had never felt such soft earth before. He had known asphalt and cement. He had known the hard, cracked earth of the parched lands. Never this soft loam, this moss, as the trees dripped down onto his skin, onto his fur. We're just about there. We're just about there, said the raven. Just about where? He said. Where are you taking me? There it is. There it is, the raven said, and flew away. Where are you going? He said, and he glanced ahead. and he saw what the ravens saw. There, as the sun began to set, he saw the incoming banks of fog. "Where are you going?" he said, as the raven flew away, and the fog rolled in. And the boy trembled there, lost in the forest that he had never been to before, in a strange land, as the mists roiled towards him. "No, no, no, no!" he called, and he began to scramble away, trying to find his way, but he tripped over a root. He scrambled to his feet again. He ran, and the mist rolled closer and closer, and as he tried to run, it wasn't long before he could barely see 5 feet before him, and he knew then that he was in it again. He is in the fog again. He huddled there in the cold night with the mists around him, with the wetness on his fur. He huddled there. "Boy. Boy. Who's there?" he said. "What is that?" "Boy. Boy. Boy. Hey, boy," came a voice, and he scrabbled towards it, the only source of meaning in this mist. Someone was there, and he reached out one paw and another one, and splash! His paw came into a stream or a pond of cold water. He shook it off, and he saw then, sitting on the side of the bank, a little strange creature crouched there. "Boy," said the toad, "you can't just stay here." "Well, what am I supposed to do?" he said. "It's coming for you, you know. It'll destroy you," said the toad. "It's going to hunt you down if you just hide here." I don't know where to go. I can't run away. I don't know the way out," said the boy. "I don't know how to escape it. I can't escape it this time. This isn't my place. I don't know this place. I don't know this place." "You can't run," said the toad. "You can't run. It'll find you if you run. It'll find you if you hide." Said the toad. "What can I do?" said the boy. "What can I do?" "Find it," said the toad. "Find it. Go find it. You must find it first. Find it," said the toad. And the wolf boy there in the mist, he was scared, but he had many years of being fierce. He knew what it was to be fierce. Even here, even in this place, he knew how to hunt. He got to his feet. He began to prowl. He caught its first glimpse of it, but later that night, it was prowling too. The long-limbed, wiry, tall figure of his hunter. The green-skinned thing that came for him. It didn't see him, though. It didn't sense him. He was quieter and sharper than it was, he knew. It was bigger, but he was more cunning, and he tracked it there, through the mists in the wood. He circled it. He followed it. He knew he was on its trail, and he knew soon he would get his chance. Before long, he would have his moment. He saw it there ahead of him, just ahead in the mists, and he crept towards it, step, step, step. And then, all of a sudden, he was falling down the side of a ravine. But that was impossible. It was right there before him. It had walked out over this place. How could... And then he'd landed on the hard rocks at the bottom, a stream trickling by, and he felt, all of a sudden, something cold and hard clamp over his wrists. And he jerked up. He tried to run. But there was metal manacles on his wrists attached to the very rock of the rock bottom of the ravine itself. They affixed him there, and he jerked away. He tried to stand. He tried to run. But it was strong, and he couldn't. He looked up fearfully then, because he heard the approach. And smiling, coming out of the mists, came his prey, his predator. Found you, it said. Found you at last. What are you? What are you? He said. You don't remember me? I'm hurt, it said. I don't know. I don't know anymore. We've known each other for, it seems like a lifetime, said the thing. And now, finally, we can bring it to an end. You and I have done this dance for far too long. It leaned in. Its maw seemed to dominate his whole vision as it came closer, its mouth opening as it licked its lips. Its teeth, he could see, were so long and so sharp. And it looked so happy. And the voice came to him then, a voice that he tried not to think of. The floods came before, the voices said. They washed us away, and they will come again, and they will come again, and they will come again. And there, by that creek in the ravine, he knew what it had been like for those in the city when the floods had come. He knew because he felt them rising in him. The tsunami wave, the tidal flood coming up in his bones, rising up through him. He could feel the water from his feet, from his knees, pressed into the damp earth there by the creek. He could feel its power in him. And as he saw the green thing come closer, as if it would devour his very face, his head, as if it would take him for its own, he felt the water reach his chest, his shoulder, and the great upswelling of the flood through him, and he found suddenly that he was standing, the shackles breaking from his wrists, and he was taking the throat of the green thing in his sharp clawed hands, and he was choking it. He bore it to the ground. It struggled, it tried to push him off, it clawed at him, but he dug into it with his claws and his teeth. He said, feeling the water pound in his veins. He scratched it open, he tore its ribs from its chest, he buried his face in its heart. He tore its heart from its body. And he breathed in, feeling the corpse beneath him. And he breathed out, and then, "Ah!" he called, as he was racked with pain. Ah! He could feel it from the muscles in his back, all up and down his spine. Burning pain, worse than he had ever felt, through his body, as if his very bones were breaking open. Ah! He called, and he fell to the ground, and the pain was too much. And he thought he died there in the mists. Perhaps he and this thing were one and the same. Perhaps he could not live without it. Perhaps their encounter could only end in one way. But, surprisingly, to the little wolf boy, surprisingly, the sun did rise again. His head pounded, but he got somehow to his knees, the light hurting his eyes as it came down through the rooftops of this deep, deep forest, the heart of the forest. He felt something move on his back. He looked back. He saw there, from his back, he could never remember what they had looked like, but there they were. His stumps, the stumps of his wings, had regrown. They extended out to either side from him. Out 6, 7 feet. Huge wings. They twitched as he noticed them. They quivered. He didn't know how to control them. They were black wings, like a crow's wings. But at the tips, there were white feathers pinioning it. They looked like bat wings, like angel wings, or like the place where the two do meet. He didn't know what once they had looked like, but here they were now on his back. They folded. He looked down at the creek then, and the waters were so clear and bright, they sparkled in the sunbeams. And he thought of the raven, who had been so sure that he'd been looking for something. And here, now, though the raven had left him at his moment of need, he thought, she was right. She was right. And he began to travel upstream, up the creek, towards the current. He walked for much of that day, slowly, slowly, till he came through this verdant little valley to its end, where a pool gathered at the well springs of the creek. The waters, he said. The waters. I found them. Found them. And he lowered his face in to the spring water, to the deep pool. He buried his head in it. He felt it so cold on the fur of his face, on his nose, on his mouth, on his ears. He drank. The water wet his whole head. It came up and dripped with his tears off of his face, out onto his chest. He looked up and he saw the beams of the sun coming down there. He walked up a little ways to a ledge, side of the ravine that overlooked the wellspring. He rolled his shoulders. His wings extended. He looked at them. They looked like pitiful things. There were parts where they were just scaffolding, just the bones, not even any membrane. Whole aspects of them completely uncovered by feathers. They didn't look like they could physically support flight of perhaps even small beings, least of all him. He stepped out off the ledge. His wings, they moved slowly. His feet skimmed the surface of the pool. Ripples spread out. But he didn't fall in. With his wings beating so slowly, he hovered there. You could feel again the feeling of the waters, of the magic pounding in his bones, in his gut. ever so slowly, with ever so much caution and ever so much will, he began to raise away from the pool, up, up, to the level of the trees, up to their tops. And there, the direct sunlight caught his wings, caught his wingtips. That was the first feeling he'd had of the direct sunlight in some time here in the forest. A little higher, and his head broke the shade. He could feel the sunlight wash down over his face. And above the treetops, up, far away, into the sky above the trees. And he, there in the sky, forest down below, open skies above, he rose up and he looked up to the sun shining there. He saw it there, the golden globe. And he moved towards it. He moved up, grew bigger and bigger, until he entered the sun, swallowed him up like the mists once had. And there, he could feel the warmth all around him, and he looked out from the sun, and he watched the world down below. That little wolf boy, he still watches us from the sun, watches down, shining his fierce gaze, shining his attention, shining everything he learned down on the people below. He watches them, that wolf boy, that angel from the sun.